Well, I think one of the fascinating things that we've all observed in nature at some time in our life is when the sun is setting and you get this beautiful backlit light peeping through the trees. You've also got the added excitement of the reflections. The reflections, usually they're mirror image. Like if you've got boats in the water, what you see is a reflection. It's exactly the same thing, just upside down. But cast shadows are totally different. And in this case, the cast shadows are all originating from one area. So they're like the spokes of a wheel. And frequently you'll see what we call the finger of God going through the trees, and then we'll see the cast shadows on the ground. So they're very, very exciting. Well, this is kind of fun. My staff came in and said, Karlyn, you have to sign this giclée print because somebody wants to purchase it. And this was the original inspiration for this deep woods. Years and years ago, I was walking with my camera down by the lake, took this picture, and then shortly after that, after I'd painted it, the Christmas Song of the North was presented to me as a book that I might possibly want to illustrate. And after a lot of convincing, I decided to do it because I love to paint winter scenes. And here you can see I used that same image for the front and the back cover, and then the rest of the book is all little winter scenes. This was really fun to do. And this book was printed by a facility up in Duluth, Minnesota. And it didn't sell a lot of copies, I don't know, somewhere maybe around 8,000. And then Scholastic Press wanted to pick this up. And they offered me a contract. It was half as much commission. And I thought, well, that's too bad. You only make about 10% anyway. And now they're offering me about 6%. But see, they do all these fairs at the schools, and so they're offering a percentage to them. I thought, okay, I'm going to sign it. I'll take a chance. And it was really great because the checks started coming in. When I used to get a check from the company in Duluth, I'd say to my husband, hey, honey, you want to go out for a fish fry? And when the checks started rolling in from Scholastic Press, I'd say, hey, honey, you want to go out to Europe? So when all was said and done, I'm actually done now, and I'm doing the reprints myself. But when all was said and done, we sold over 200,000 copies of this book, so I was absolutely delighted. And just another little story about this particular picture. I gave the original to my daughter because when she got married, this was the site where she got married. It was a beautiful wedding. So I gave her that painting as a wedding gift. And when she had this tragic fire where she lost her entire restaurant and her home, she also lost this painting. So I don't have the original anymore, and I'm kind of sad about that, but it's been fun to paint it again and share it with you. This is a lovely scene down at our memorial park here in Washburn. And this is the fall setting with the fall leaves. So I'm going to do a winter scene today, but I'm actually going to do another one with a fall scene because the way I paint the trees in the fall, although it's similar to the deep woods, it's quite different in that the colors you use. So again, you see the spokes of the wheel coming around. You have the tissue that's been lifted out. This is a pretty panoramic view. And the real trick is that you start with this underpainting where you create this focus of light going from the yellows into the pinks, into the cooler colors around the edges. So the underpainting helps to enhance this focus of light, but the foliage was all created on dry paper. Here is the lesson we're going to do. And on this one, I chose not to add the circles of masking because I didn't want that extreme light right here. I just kind of wanted to lift away with the tissue later. Now I can still put this one under the faucet and do the more extreme light coming through. I just didn't have time to do it. And you can see I also have a snowstorm going on here, which is fun. You take an acrylic white ink. Now I've tried everything from gesso, you name it. The only thing I found that worked was to take acrylic white ink and just scoop some out, pick it up with your toothbrush, and then just simply do a little spray like this. And you can just, if you have any areas you don't like, you can get rid of them. Just spray them out. But you can also, like these upper trees coming out here were kind of boring. There were just too many of them. So just coming in with the spray up here especially helped to push that back quite a bit. Keep your emphasis on that very beautiful light coming through the trees. So let's get started. Well, to prepare for this, I drew in lots of woods here. Using my HB pencil, I'll indicate where the lake is later. I decided not to do the little circles in masking around the tree. I'll just do it with my toothbrush, and I can create almost the same effect. Now, these are trees that have heavily laden snow on them. So I actually took my palette knife and the Incredible White Mask. This is my favorite mask. And I just dipped it in the masking and found all these little corners here, including each one of these little fingers coming down. And it's really important that you design all these little fingers into the heavily laden snow here. Whatever you do, don't make it just a smooth line. The top is smooth because the wind blows that over and it's very smooth. So the tops of all these lines are relatively smooth. But these little fingers of snow down here are very, very critical. So get as many of those in as you can. So what we're going to do in this first underpainting is we're going to create the focus of light. So we're going to start here with our yellows and golds. And then as we move around, we're going to get into some warm color, for example, like an orange or a red. And then we're going to get into the blues. And so you can pick any palette you'd like. Now, I actually learned a lot of this from Nita Engel years ago. And she really loved to use like a primary yellow, like Winsor yellow. She would use Winsor red. I don't have that on my palette anymore. But you could use like a permanent rose. And then a cobalt blue. And these three colors, they're all transparent, and they would make a beautiful circle of light going around. Just beautiful. So you'd start with the yellow, go into the pink, then go into the blue. Now I'm going to choose a little deeper color than that. When I went to teach in Nova Scotia, the students out there live along the ocean, and what they love to do is they love to paint the water in more of a stormy, more dramatic color scheme. So using raw sienna and quinacridone burnt orange and indigo blue, which is really quite black. This would be their choice of colors. And see, wow, that's going to create some real drama. So let's get started. We're going to start with some Quin Gold. Now this is pretty bright. This is going to be the first color that we're going to circle around here. And the Quin Gold, first I'm going to leave the white of the paper. Some of this color will probably go into it. And notice how I didn't make a perfect circle. I'm just kind of dropping this color around. I'm going to put just a little bit of raw sienna in with this. It's very close. You can hardly tell the difference. Then, instead of a pink or a red, I'm going to use quinacridone burnt orange. Okay, now I'm going to get a little bit darker down here. Now this is a lot of color considering this is all going to be snow and a lot of whites. But you'll see the colors are just going to move quite a bit. If you choose this palette, make sure you're very careful with the indigo. The indigo activates so dark. And what we want to do is we want to go all the way to the edges with this indigo. So activate it first of all on your palette, then go all the way to the edge. Now comes the fun. We're going to get out our sprayer, and starting on one side, we're going to let these colors mix. Now you saw how much I wet this, and they're just starting to move a little bit. So starting in the middle, I usually do one quadrant at a time, one section. So I'm going to start here and spray. And see, here comes the yellow into the orange. And then that color is going to go into the indigo. And see, none of these colors like to run all that much. Oh, I see we have a little action up here. That's good. Let's switch over here and push those colors back. So we're going to start over here and just do a little section at a time. Don't try to do too much. And you might have to use your finger, especially when you're working with these areas that have been masked, because the color gets caught on the masking. And what we want to get is this continuous flow of the light to dark, light to dark. Ooh, this is starting to look really nice. Ooh, it's starting to look good. Now we're getting closer to the bottom here. So we're going to start here and move those colors out to the edge. This is what we want, this blended look. Blended look. There it is, starting to blend. Oh, it's moving so nicely. This has really been fun. I love these colors. It's going to be very dramatic. You can see now the glow. Earlier you could see every brush stroke. Now with this constant spraying, moving it from the white to the edge, each quadrant at a time, patiently waiting for the color to go out to the edge. And see, I have a few hot spots here, but I kind of like them. I'm not going to worry about it. What I was looking for was creating the gray tones on the edge and the lightest lights in the center. So actually I'm very happy with this underpainting. If you want to, it's not necessary because all these trees are going to be dark. But every now and then somebody really likes to lift out some of this color. Be very careful when you do this that you're not adding water. So your brush has to be dry so that it's thirsty and it's actually lifting color out to bring you back to the white of the paper. This only happens when you wet the paper first. A thirsty brush doesn't work when you don't wet the paper. Once the paint starts going into the surface of the paper, there's really no other lifting. Well, when this is completely dry, we're going to come back and start adding the foliage. Okay, you can see that the colors have dried and there is a beautiful glow coming from the lightest part into the warms into the cooler edges. So this is a true focus of light. I'm really quite pleased. Now I know it looks really dark, but when we start coming in with a lot of the foliage and the shadows, it's going to start looking really bright. We hope, anyway. And the reason I used the masking that is clear is now all of these trees have white snow on them instead of the color of the mask white. A lot of people use Pebeo or some of the Grumbacher orange. Oh, that just, to me, is so distracting. So it goes on white, dries clear. So I really like this. This is the only masking I use. It's called the Incredible White Masking. And then when it comes off, you don't have any surprises because it's white and it stays white. It's lovely. Now I'm going to take, first of all, a mixture of quinacridone burnt orange. This is a beautiful earthy color. And when you mix it with the complement directly across, this is Antwerp blue, what you get is a beautiful, beautiful, really dark green. Now at this point you get a brown. See, kind of a dead looking brown. But if I keep adding more and more Antwerp blue, this will turn into a beautiful dark green. Now what we're going to do is we're going to push this really dark green underneath the fingers of these trees. So I usually start on the far left so I'm not touching it. So it doesn't take very long. My paper's dry and I just push it and tuck it underneath all of these heavily snow-laden branches. Now I put all of them on one side of the picture, but it actually works out pretty good. And you can see these are really, really dark, almost a gray-green. But it'll be just fine because the next color I'm going to use are bright yellows and bright golds. So I'm going to start with my Windsor yellow, make a big, beautiful puddle of this color. And I'm using a brush called an oriental brush. Now this is actually made out of a squirrel hair. And the reason I like this brush is see how it releases the paint. I can just pick up big gobs of this paint, and when I throw it, it looks like the branches on the tree. And when I throw the blue into this later, it's going to turn into some greens. And some of it's going to stay yellow. So the real key to success here is to get this paint really thick with color. So take and load it up. And I'm going to go like halfway across. And I'm even going to throw it up here along the edge. Now it's time for me to make a big puddle of quinacridone gold. Again, very big, very rich with color. And it has to be fluid enough to release from your brush. If you're doing this and you're having a hard time releasing it, try putting a little more water in it. And think about the directional movement you want. See, I'm trying to get these branches to they're swooping down like this. Now I'm going to mix a big puddle of Antwerp blue. This is an absolutely incredible color. It goes all the way to a very deep value, about a value 9. And it also likes to move. So if I throw this color into these yellow swooping branches here, it's actually going to move and fill that in. When you first throw it, it looks like it's just laying on top. But they're taking a little while, they're getting acquainted, and it's starting to move. Now when I throw this into the gold, we're going to get a much different color than we're going to get where it goes into the brighter yellow. You can already tell there's a little color change there. And then be sure to throw some of the color up above here. What happens is a lot of people don't throw enough color. You would be surprised. This is quite a workout. You can consider this maybe like a 2-mile walk. Don't I wish? And if you want any of these a little bigger, you can just throw water, and that will open them up a bit. So sometimes I do this, I just throw a little water at the end to make them fill out a little more. Now the next thing I'm going to do, you can see it on the finished painting. See how I'm going to soften it along the edges. And I'm going to do this with my fine mister. So I'm just going to come in here and spray into this. Spray, spray, all along the edges. And sometimes I'll even take my brush with clean water in it and just come in and soften these edges a little bit. Okay, now we're going to do the other side. Same thing. We're going to start with our Windsor yellow. Don't try to do both sides at once. Just try to stay on one side at a time. Now about halfway across, I'm going to switch to the Quin Gold and throw the Quin Gold. Now this is going to give me a darker, lighter. Really important to get that feel. So here I intermix them just a little bit. And then pretty much stick to this at the other end. Some of the branches are going the other direction too, so you notice I throw it this way and I throw it this way. Now most of the branches are hanging down, so I throw in a downward motion. Very seldom, you're gonna love this, throw up. Again, I'm gonna throw just a little plain water to broaden some of these strokes of color. Now I'm ready to come in with the Antwerp blue. And this is when we'll start seeing the greens. But what I love is we don't lose some of those yellows. See, we have both. We have yellow, yellow-green, blue, and dark green. Just love it. And the reason we do this on dry paper is we want these little holes where we can see the background color through it. So that's why we went through all that trouble to do that lovely focus of light, so that that would be coming through to the very end. Okay, now I'm going to wet the edges throwing just water, throwing a little more color here. Could take my fine mister and just soften these edges. Now, I do like to come in and add some little dark branches. So I'm going to do a few of those branches while this is still wet. So with my palette knife and with some quinacridone burnt orange, I'm going to come in here, do a mixture of quin orange and French ultramarine blue. This is going to give me a lovely dark brown. And what I do is I pick it up so it's sitting mostly on the edge here, and using the tip of my brush, I come in and draw out some of these beautiful branches. And see, they're all over. And you can never make too many of these. While this paint is still wet, I'm going to come back and using indigo. Now this is a color, I told everybody, don't get this color. Ugh, we don't know what's in here. And now all of a sudden after my visit to Halifax, and they use this all the time, I'm back to loving the color. Now it does get dark very fast, so we're going to have to put a lot of water in this mixture to make it work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this at the base of the tree and pull it out into our shadow. And see, what's going to happen is each tree is going to lead out with the shadows, but then there's also these cast shadows in between from all the branches. So what you do is you start it at the tree. Even a little tree like this would have a nice cast shadow. And then these guys over here would each have a shadow. So don't take on the whole world here. We're just going to do this much. And then we're going to take and throw some colors back and forth like this, just like we did up above. It's the same kind of thing. Then down below, I'm going to move into my big brush here. And I'm basically going to just fill this up with this color. And make all your strokes coming in to meet this. They started going that way. That wasn't a good idea. Keep all your strokes coming in to meet these strokes up here. Now I'm going to switch to my little brush, do a couple of trees over here. Now let's start here. Remember, our source of light is here, so these are just going to keep radiating out like the spokes of a wheel. They're not perfect. Now this is an area that's kind of hard to deal with, so what you do is you just throw some water and get some little broken branches going across there. Oh yeah, that looks good. We did it. We did it. And some can be lighter. I'm just throwing water now because I want some of these lighter and some of them darker. Now usually shadows are darker close to the subject, and then they get lighter as they move away. So sometimes I'll come in and go just a little bit darker closer to the subject here, and then lighten it up as we get away from it. So that was easy. Look how quickly that happened. So just as a little reminder, don't forget to do the directional movement coming in with your big brush. And then when you get to these edges, throw some water so that you're getting these interesting broken shapes and we don't actually see the end of our brush stroke. We don't want to see that. I think we got all the trees. So now we'll just let this dry. When I come back, we'll paint in the trees. Now, this is where some students get discouraged. They say, well, this doesn't look like anything. And I keep telling them, it will. When you put the trees in, it's going to change completely. Be patient, be hopeful, and it will work. Well, now this is completely dry. And one of the things I like to do is just to take a damp tissue and clean off my snow. This is the masking. And be careful not to pick up any color on the other side. But I don't like to leave the masking full of all this unnecessary color. There, that looks a lot better. Now we know. I just love that white masking because it looks like snow already. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by painting in some of these trees before the camera, and then I'm going to go off camera to finish them. And I want them to be a lovely brown. So I probably will just go with the simple mixture of quinacridone burnt orange and cobalt blue. And in this mixture, if you put more orange, you end up with a very warm brown. And if you put more blue, you end up with a very cool brown. So I kind of go between these two colors. What I'm going to do is the ones that are closer to the sunlight, I'm going to paint them with a little bit warmer color because they're receiving more of the sun. And I'm just working with a number 8 brush, and I'm picking up the spaces in between. Now this is a new concept for some people, where you actually just paint in between the foliage. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come down here and paint to the edge of our shadow. Now it's important when you get to the edge of the shadow that you just wet your brush and kind of get a blend going here. Soften that shadow a little bit. And see, I even like to pull a little bit of this color, not much, just a little bit, out into our shadow area. So you can see it's even a little bit of a change of color. This seems like it should be a little darker. I think I'm going to go just a little bit darker here. And when you get to the top, on this particular drawing, I left a lot of open space. And I'm just going to go ahead and paint it because I'm going to have a snowstorm later, and I'll kind of wipe out some of this area with my snowstorm. But oh boy, does now the fun begins. Look at this. Oh, I just love this look. Because with the contrast in these darker values, look how light that looks. We were thinking our underpainting was a little bit dark, but it's perfect. And I'm just going to paint maybe one more tree here. You can see how easy this is. Just paint between the foliage, and it really comes together. So I'm going to go off camera to finish this, because you certainly don't need to watch me paint every tree here. It's all the same. I'm going to show you one more trick before I turn off the camera. Now another really fun thing is painting these shadows. So I'm going to, well, seeing as that tree is wet, I better get over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift the snow. And what I don't like to use those erasers. I don't know, they're just too much. So I just start it and give it a pull, and I can just clean it right up like that. So I start it with my finger, grab the corner, and it will come right up. So now our next death-defying act is just to put some shadows in these tree branches. Wet the tree branch first. And then what I do is I just take a little bit of cobalt blue, pure cobalt blue. And I start at the bottom, and I kind of push this up between the fingers. And see, a little bit of that color that you put in before, the green, will come up too. It's very cool. So you want to leave the top of it white, and you just want to get this lovely shadow down by the fingers. And then notice I've got my salt real handy. So I also like to put a little salt on that before it dries, and it gives it a lovely glisten. So I'm going to go off camera now, go ahead and finish painting all these trees, adding a few more branches using my trusty painting knife, and I'm going to finish the rest of these snow-covered branches. Now your painting has to be perfectly dry to do this. So this has actually had about 2 days to dry. Plus I took a hairdryer after it too. So if you line up all these signs here, they pretty much go right behind this center little skinny tree here. So I'm just going to pick a spot right here, and that's where I'm going to have the light filtering through. So what I'm going to do first of all is simply wet my brush and start a little bit of the process here. So I'm actually lifting away the light. I'm going to light it again, wet it again, do it again here. And then of course it looks soiled. So now comes the fun part. You run this under the faucet. Let me put it this way so maybe you can see it a little better. And we just run it, clean it up a little more. And there's our light from behind the tree. It's pretty awesome. You can see how the colors are pretty bonded to the paper. And that's because I allowed it a little time to dry before we did this. Now I'm going to let this whole thing dry, and I'm going to come in and show you how we do the rays, the finger of God going through the trees. And then we're going to have a snowstorm. Okay, now some time has lapsed and this has had a chance to dry. You can't do the rest of this with any moisture on your paper. Your paper has to be dry. And what we're going to do now is we're going to lift out the finger of God through the trees. And then we're going to have a little snowstorm using this F&W acrylic white ink. So I wanted to show you this picture of the deep woods with the light coming through, and see what it does is it actually obliterates the trees right directly behind it. You can't even see the tree. So most people when they do this scrubbing, the first thing they want to do is go back and paint the tree. And I keep saying, no, don't do it. Just leave it. That's exactly how it looks in nature. So I'll leave that up to you, but generally speaking, you don't have to go back and do anything. So now the next thing I'm going to do is just take a tissue, dampen it, and I'm going to start lifting away very slowly, just a little, just like this. So you just take and rub it away, and keep turning your tissue so you're always touching a clean part of the tissue, so you're not rubbing the paint. See how cool that is? The biggest mistake people make is they go and do a pinwheel and they just ruined it. So you need to have some of these longer, some shorter, and I would say just maybe one more little short one coming off right about here. And not to go very high with it, just a little finger coming up. Perfect. See, and I kept that one lighter. These I kept the lightest of all. And I often like to do one down in my snow area. So again, coming out from here, just doing a little sawing about in here. We can still create a little bit of that finger of God right in our snow shadows. Good enough. Cool. So that's really fun. Oh, the finger of God. Now, I usually put salt when I do this vignette style. I usually put a little salt around there and it kind of obliterates everything. All of a sudden I can see these trees so clearly that I decided one of the best things I could do was to put some snow, to have a little snowstorm. Put some of this acrylic white ink. Now, one of the things you have to do is you have to stir this really well and dig up anything that might be on the bottom. If you don't stir this well, it's not going to be completely opaque. So shaking it is just going to aerate it and make it full of bubbles. Now, this comes with a little squeeze thing, so we'll just go ahead and squeeze some out. And now I'm just going to take my toothbrush. This is going to go into this mixture. Then I usually just bang it a few times and check it out right here. Oh, look at that, perfect. And this will give us a nice little snowstorm. Oh, I love this. So we'll pick it up again. Then I turn it over so that when I'm spraying with my toothbrush in an upright position. Then I'm spraying around the edges. Well, I think we have pretty much taken care of this painting. I don't think I mentioned to you that with the camera off, I did come in and I put the horizon line back here and then dropped it down. This is like the edge of the cliff, and this is Lake Superior. And when I painted this in, I just used cobalt blue, and then I put a little salt in it, so it gave kind of the illusion of little waves or something. And be very careful when you do that you measure down so that your horizon is absolutely level. If it's tilting at all, it's a big mistake. So there you have, Deep Woods in the snowstorm now. I just had a little afterthought here. Very often when you're just throwing the paint, or if you haven't had a lot of experience, you'll end up with some spots where you don't want them. And often what people do is they just take a tissue and they dampen it and start rubbing it. It's like the worst thing you can do. You just rub that in to the point where you'll never get it out. So the best thing you can do is to take a Q-tip, just a nice little Q-tip. And if you have a spot you don't want, you just do a little back and forth motion like this, turning the Q-tip as you do it. And what that does is it lifts the color without going ever on a dirty surface. See, now that whole surface is dirty. Then we'll turn it over and go to the other side and rub it around. Let me get another Q-tip wet. Here's another little one. Again, just a back and forth motion. Look at that, cleaned right up. And that you didn't rub it in. See, all the soiling went into the tip of your Q-tip. So this is usually the last thing I do when I finish any painting. I clean them up. You have to be careful because see, there is that subtle color under here. You can see where I lifted it, it's a little bit lighter. It's still okay, but you have to kind of go around, not just that one little spot, but you have to kind of work it into a little bigger area so that you're not losing it all in one spot. And meanwhile, you can pretty much clean these up, but I can see those white spots. That's the only part that's a little bit risky, is that, so you get rid of the spot, but you end up with a white spot. But I don't mind it in this picture. Works pretty good. So I hope that's helpful.